Hi. Welcome everyone. Today is another episode, and this time we are having Julio Santos on the show. So today is going to be on how one can stay relevant in tech. And let's not forget, I am the host, Iro Inkechi Omolola, and welcome to another episode at Tech with Iro. And as you all know, Tech with Hero basically is a platform that gives out tech information to tech talents or enthusiasts. And the main reason is because we have seen that information is very, very key. And we have decided to ensure that we are bringing experts, people that are good in that field, to come share experience and come give us tech information that could also help us in our own career and journey. So before I get started and bring our guest on stage, I would like to share a little brief introduction about our guest for today. So, yes, we are live now. Thank you. Yes, so we are live now. And um, we have with us our guest, Julio Santos. He's an engineering leader and he has also managed engineering leaders. So he's someone that has been in the space for quite a long period of time and is going to be giving us, imagine somebody that has these years of experience, that has not just been a developer or in the engineering space, but has also led engineering leaders that are also doing so well in this space. So I've shared the profile of Julio to us in the community already, so we wouldn't be diving too much into it as we're bringing him on stage, and he'll also be giving us brief about himself and also like some fun facts that we do not know that Julio does. So, yeah. And welcome on stage, Julio.
Awesome.
Yes. Hi,
Awesome.
Julio.
Hi. So am I on now?
Yes, you are. You're on.
Awesome.
You're live.
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah,
So excited.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Hero. So excited.
Thank you to Julio.
hmm
Yeah. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. So I'm in California, so it's 11 in the morning, so it's still sunny out. Well, it's going to be sunny for a while. Still very early. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. So today's going to be an interesting one, because you want to dish information on how we can stay relevant. Because a lot of persons have this question. I know because personally, like me, I have the question. I'm sure other techies also have this question that I don't want to code forever. I don't want to code forever. I don't want to code forever. So this episode is going to be an interesting one. But before we dive into the episode for today, can we get to know who Julio is? So just
All
give
right.
us very brief introduction about who you are because I've shared your bio to them. So
Okay.
just brief and fun facts, what you do outside tech, the fun things you do outside tech.
Outside tech. Okay. Well, uh, I I don't have many hobbies to be honest, right? Uh, but what I love to do actually, I used to DJ. I DJ for
Oh
you know
wow.
fairly well for me at least very large audiences. I DJ for 1,000 people, which was
like
very
so you were named DJ Julio.
well. It's funny because I actually play
Mm,
with different names, and at some point it was Julio, like DJ Julio. Anyways, so it's kind
oh,
of a
okay.
silly name. But anyways, I play with different names. But yeah, so I used to DJ. I used to stream even on Twitch. live setting. It was kind of the closest you get from a hobby from me. Other than that, I just just love to hang out, go on walks, and not you know nothing really exciting. To be honest, I do
And
listen
I hope
to music.
it's not tech that's shaping you to this way, you know.
Right, right, yeah. I do listen to a lot of music. I do collect vinyl records. I love it,
Okay.
and so that's where I
Okay.
spend most of my time. Actually, if I'm not working, I'm probably listening to music. So that's my hobby, I guess, if that's a hobby.
Okay. So thank you for coming to the show once again, and thank you for wanting to impact the knowledge you have to other people. It's a great one, and we really appreciate your passion for the community. So let's drive straight into today's business. So, Julio, can you tell us how you really got started in tech? Like, has it been like tech has been your thing from the beginning,
Yep.
or how you transitioned and just started tech?
Cool, cool. So I I need to go all the way back, right? Like, and
Yeah,
funny story, maybe I don't know. I did grow up in Africa, in the Congo and Angola first, and then the Congo. And at some point, so I went to high school. I did all that, and I was going to go to college. And like maybe 2 weeks before I left Kinshasa at the time to go to Europe, I was going to go to college in Europe. And a friend of mine showed me a computer. I had never seen a computer before, right?
really.
And yeah, I mean, this was a long time ago, right?
Okay.
Obviously. And I fell in love with that thing. It was like, I forget what it was, like Sinclair something. I don't know. It wasn't my computer, it was hers. And I fell in love immediately with that thing, right? I wanted to be able to know how to control that thing, like build programs, whatever, right? So, anyways, so I went to college, and right then I decided what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a computer scientist, computer programmer, whatever. I had before that I wasn't sure. I'm going to college, but I don't know to do what. But 2 weeks before I left, I saw that computer. It's like this is what I want to do. I got hooked right away. So, anyways, I did go to college. I studied computer science, and then so this was the beginning of the web, right? There
Okay.
was the web. I mean, web came out in 94, 95, something like that.
That's when you
And
started tech, 1994.
yeah,
Wow.
and yeah,
I was
and
not born then. I was not born then.
yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Uh, but
Okay.
but I was like, I saw the first browser. I was like, this is magic. It's amazing, right? And so, and I was at that time I was living in Portugal, actually, right? I'm Portuguese originally, and so I said, okay, I want to be in a part of the world where this is happening. Where are we building this? Where are we building this technology, right? And of course, it was in the Silicon Valley. So like, okay, how do I get into the Silicon Valley, right? I wanted to do that. I wanted to be in the Silicon Valley, surrounded by other engineers and be part of the community. That was my goal, right? And so I had my resume online. I found someone who had a server. I put my resume up. Now back then there was no LinkedIn, there was no Google, there was not much, right? There was Yahoo. That was it, right?
Okay.
And someone found my resume. I don't know how. To this day, I still don't know how they found it because back then you had to give the URL to any resource online because it was really hard to find things. But this person found my resume somehow and sent me an email. And the email said, "Hey, you want to help me start my company in the Silicon Valley?" So it
Oh,
was like
wow.
total. That's exactly what I wanted. It just I got really lucky. In fact, throughout my career, I got really lucky many times. But anyway, so that was an obvious lucky thing to happen. And it's like, yeah, of course, yes, that's what I want, right? But I have no idea how to do that. But he took care of me, like visas and plane tickets and whatever, right?
That was
So
what
yeah,
year? That was what year?
that was in '96.
1996. Wow.
But when he talked to me, it was '95. But by the time I came, it was '96. And the startup, by the way, was a startup, obviously, had no website, so I couldn't even go there and say, "Oh, let me see what they do." Like they don't exist, right? So it was a big risk for me. It was like huge. I was like, I'm going from one country to another, and I don't know what I'm doing. It's like right, but I'll go. And so the company no longer exists. In fact, after 2 or 3 years, it died.
This stuff.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah, but the startup, yeah. But yeah, so but I loved it. To me, that was like a dream come true. I was working, honestly, I was working 12 hours a day, including weekends. And and I couldn't believe they were paying me to do this. So like to me, it's like I'm having so much fun and they pay me. This
foreign.
is amazing. But anyway, so I was in heaven. Really loved it, and that was the city, the specific city in the Silicon Valley was Sunnyvale. That's the name of the city, and I still live in Sunnyvale to this day. I
Wow.
Yeah. Not the same house, obviously, but the same city. Anyways, I that company didn't go anywhere. I joined other startups. I love startups. Uh, I joined another startup. That startup actually made it. It was eventually acquired by IBM, and then IBM. I liked it. I mean, it was interesting, but it wasn't a startup, right? So I went back to after a few years. I went back to a startup, and eventually I was at PayPal. Not a startup. It was also through an acquisition. I landed at PayPal, and and the whole time I'm just being an engineer doing uh, programming. My background tends to be at the time was more like Java backend performance kind of stuff. That's what I was doing then. And then at PayPal, my boss left, right? And it was a very small group inside PayPal, but my boss left, and he recommended that I become the manager
Wow.
instead of him. And until then, honestly, I had very little respect for managers, right? Like I did
And
not know what
at
I did not know
what
what the
year? What year
this
did you
was
like
this was
became the
2007.
manager?
2007.
2007.
Hmm.
Wow.
And I remember like a few years before that, I was interviewing the person who was going to be my manager, and I asked him like, "Why do I need someone like you? Like, why interviewing you? Like, what do you do, right?" And because that was my experience with managers, they weren't very good. And so I asked this guy, Steve, and he explained to me what he could do for the team, for me personally, for the company. And that was the first time that really hit me. It's like, oh wow, this okay. I can see the value. I can see how you can help someone's career. I can see how you can act as a shield for the rest of the company, etc. So like, all right, and I was right. I mean, he was an amazing manager. But anyways, I was still just a developer, right? And then a few years later, now it's 2007. I'm at PayPal, and my boss leaves and says, "Hey, Julio should be the manager." And I was scared to death. I was like, man, like I don't know how to manage, but what does that mean? Like I don't know how to manage people. And I didn't. I had no idea what I was doing. My idea of management was to have one-on-ones on Mondays, and then the rest of the time, the rest of the week, I would just be coding, right? So
Okay.
not very good manager. But I loved it. Even though it was just like I'm going to have one-on-ones on Monday and talk to people, understand what they need, what's going on, etc. I just loved it. At that point, my first time being a manager, I love to help people, to help them be more efficient, to help them be more productive and happier, whatever. I really like that. And then be able to scale, right? Because that's something we often forget when you go into one of the reasons why you get into management is because you can do way more things than you alone, right? I love to do what I was doing, but you can only go so far, right? And all of a sudden, if you're leading a team of 10 or 50 or 100, well, you can do 100 times more, right? And so that's very important. But anyway, so at the time I just realized I really liked it, and I became a manager, very hands-on for a long time. I'd say for another 10 years. I was kind of engineer manager, right? But that was actually not ideal. I realized later it's really hard to do those two jobs well, right? You have to pick one, at least for
Okay,
me.
is it the engineering side and the coding side, managerial side and the coding side, right?
Yes, yes. Uh, it's hard, at least for me, it was very hard to be a good manager and a good engineer, right? I had to choose, right? And over the years, now it's 2015, I'm at GoDaddy now, also through an acquisition, right? I said earlier that I got lucky in my career, like many, lucky events. And so several startups, acquisitions, and now in bigger companies. And so at GoDaddy, that's the first time I became a director of engineering, right?
Wow.
So now I have like a big organization or engineering organization, big products, budgets. Things become a little bit less technical, if you will. So it's no longer about coding, but you still have to be technical. And that's going to be, of course, the point of this conversation today. Even though you're not coding anymore, you have to be technical. You cannot be just someone who has no idea how programming works.
Works.
So anyway, so at GoDaddy, eventually was invited to, was approached to lead the engineering team, the brand new engineering team for a big digital bank called Nubank, a headquartered in Brazil. But I was approached to lead their Mexican expansion. So I did not know about this company, Nubank. Turns out it's a huge company, but at the time I did not know them. And got really excited. Was going to build Nubank Mexico in Mexico City, and I was actually going to move to Mexico City to do this. This was 2020, right? And then COVID happened, and I couldn't move to Mexico City anymore. But I was still the director of engineering for that group, so I built that team, fairly large team. We got to 110 engineers and managers, etc.
Wow.
in my organization.
Wow. So you were the one managing the 110 engineers.
Not directly, obviously, right? But I had my team, and my team
Heads.
they had some managers, and they managed their
Subordinates.
teams, etc. Yeah, but the entire organization was 112 to be exact. I loved it. It's like a great company, great great product, great vision, great people. It was really amazing. So I stayed there 3 years, and also building a bank, right? I knew nothing about banks. Honestly, I knew how to use a credit card, but that was it. And now I was building one, right? And so I learned a lot from that, obviously, not just from the management point of view, right? But just the domain, just building banks, right? I learned a lot there. And then I
Okay.
took, go ahead.
Okay, no. You can go ahead. I thought you were done, so I could ask the next question.
I'm almost done. One thing about me, there's no such thing as quick answers, right? Anyways.
Oh, definitely. That's actually the best one, anyways.
Okay, awesome.
Because we want them to understand in detail how your journey
Okay.
is.
And then a year ago, I took a sabbatical, right? And circumstances were like, okay, I'm out. I'm going to take some time off. And I was going to take a 1 year off. And 6 months in, and I was going to travel, of course, but work on my own projects. I have projects that I work on, do things, around the house, like take care of whatever, hardwood floors, whatever it is, right? So I was just going to take my time. And then and for the first 6 months, it was just really good. I considered not going back to work. Right? I say, and I don't think I can ever go back to work. There's just too much freedom is too much fun, right? And I'll never want to sit in a meeting ever again, right? Like I remember thinking that. Uh, but
You don't
then,
want to work.
yeah, exactly. But then slowly, it's like, man, I'm working on my projects. That's true, but I miss like talking to other people about my project, right? Uh, trying to figure out how to do something or what's new or having a deadline even. Like I imagine like most people hate deadlines, right? But I start missing those because it gives you kind of a goal, like, oh, I want to accomplish this, like a sense of accomplishment, right? I start missing those very dearly. And so luckily I was coaching people. I was so that was one way, and we'll talk about this. That's one way of staying technical, is actually to coach people. But anyway, so I was coaching people, and and then I was invited, I guess, to join this company that I joined on Monday. So
Now?
it's been less than a week, right? Um, and I love it. It's like that's exactly the type of company that I was looking. I mean, that was the only reason I would go back to work. It was for a company like that, a startup with young people, very energetic, a great vision, passion, smart. I mean, it was perfect. It checks all the boxes for me. I got really excited, and I'm still excited. I've been there a week, right? So it's still, of course, honeymoon phase, but still, I'm getting so many good vibes about our company. Very happy. So anyway, so my sabbatical is over. Uh, I'm sad that I don't have that freedom anymore, but I'm very happy that I joined this team working on this project. Anyway,
Okay.
so here we are.
Yeah. The story is actually interesting, especially the part that you had mentioned that you don't want to work again. So it's more like you really want to enjoy the sabbatical more than the time. Okay.
When you get to a certain point, and I hope this happens to everybody, you get to a certain point, you can actually choose what you want to do, right? Like I, if a company or a situation is not fun, I'll step out. Like I don't need it, right? Like I want to enjoy, my life, right? And right now with this company, with this team, I feel like I'm enjoying my life better than even my sabbatical. So
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So our question, right? We have one question here. How have you managed to stay connected to the technical side of things
okay.
while transitioning into a leadership role?
Okay, cool. So, I mean, there's the obvious ways, right? I'll just mention them, but I'm sure everyone can figure them out on their own. Is like learning and courses and reading books and blogs, whatever. That's kind of like the obvious stuff. Like, if you don't know how to stay technical, do that, right? Like, take courses on Udemy or whatever, right? Or read books, whatever. So that's like the easy stuff. Uh, but for me, that was not enough. And one thing that I do, I actually work on my own projects at home, right? And if you don't have an idea for a project, go on GitHub, and there's plenty of stuff that you can contribute to. But for me, it's like I love Ruby on Rails. By the way, that's my Ruby is my go-to language, and Ruby on Rails.
Oh, Ruby
I
and
just love
Rails.
it. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Okay.
I know it's not as hot as it was in 2007, 10, whatever. Uh, but I still love it. That's like I enjoy reading code. Like people read books. I like to read Ruby code. Uh, anyway, so I am building projects at home and using Ruby on Rails. So that's one thing. That's one way, right? Like just build something. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be like a whole project, right? It could be like some automation. And when you do like, oh, every day I do this thing manually. Okay, write a Python script to automate it, maybe, right? So that's one way. Like stay in touch, know your IDE or text editor or whatever it is. Like stay in touch with coding, right? Somehow, right? So for me, it's the personal projects, but for others, there's going to be other ways. And then I touched a little bit into this. I, I find it's almost a hack to stay technical is to coach people. Now, this kind of
Coach
sounds,
people.
it might sound a little bit curious, like, oh, but if you're not technical, how can you coach, right? But it will force you to stay technical because now you're talking to people with different backgrounds that do different things, and you bring your experience, but slowly some of those technical aspects, what they're working on, maybe like some tech that you never heard of before, but now you're gonna maybe look into it because you're coaching them and they mentioned it. So I find like the coaching and mentoring,
Sure.
it's actually a very nice hack on how to stay technical. But I'd
Sure,
say
that,
like,
that that mentorship is like a key thing, really, because most times a lot of persons just have the feeling of I'm not enough to
yeah,
mentor someone and all of that.
mhm,
But there's this force you get because you actually don't want to look very stupid in front of the person you're mentoring, and also you don't want to feel like you do not know it. So there's this extra effort one puts
that's
into
true.
learning. Yeah,
You
so mentorship
absolutely,
is it's really a good one.
yeah, absolutely, you got it. That's exactly it. Another uh, another kind of related hack, but is for learning that I use for learning something is to sign up to give a talk about that something. You know,
Mm.
let's say I don't know much about machine learning, even though I during my sabbatical that was one thing I wanted to learn really well. I got distracted with other things, so I didn't. But to me, like if I want to become if I want to be good at machine learning, I might sign up for to give a talk about machine learning, right, in a month or
Wow.
two, right? And then that puts the pressure on me 'cause, like now I have to learn it, right? It's like because I'm going to be teaching this, right? So I better know it, right? So that's a quick hack. It's scary, it's risky, but I think works. But something a little bit softer than that is just mentoring but at the end of the day, to encapsulate all that, there's one aspect that uh, the big umbrella for this is you have to stay curious, right? When you're mentoring or you're talking to someone says like, oh, I'm working on this or that, ask questions. How does that work? Like, but really like genuinely ask those questions and try to understand. So just stay curious, but that's more of a mindset, right? But practically is to me is the mentoring and working on my own projects at home.
Okay. So if you're just joining in, so we are on the section how to stay relevant when you no longer code. So we have Julio here, and if you have questions, you could drop it in chat. I'm checking the chat now, and I'll be asking your questions as you drop it in. So you can just drop in your questions, and we'll share it. Okay, so in your experience, Julio, what are the key challenges engineering leaders face in staying technically relevant? And how do you think one can overcome these challenges? What are the challenges they face, especially when they are trying to stay technically relevant since they no longer code and also still manage people that code?
Good question. Good question. All right. Some of the challenges of staying relevant. Um, I guess it's like sometimes you just like get caught up with work, right? Like you have to hire, you have to work on people's performance, you have to talk to other folks. It becomes about the numbers, about just growing the business, right? And you start detaching yourself from the details, right? You no longer know how code works. You no longer know, you know, what the engineers go through, what we have to build, right? Because that's not what you are paid for anymore, right? You're no longer paid to write code, right? You paid to make the business run and be profitable, right? So you focus on that. I think that's a mistake, right? Not immediately, right? But over the years becomes a problem. Uh, so that's one of the risks, right? One of the challenge, like how can I still be focused on running the business, helping the engineers build the product that's going to make the business profitable, but without detaching myself too much, right? And it's all, what they say, like, use it or lose it, right? It's like, if you don't use it, I mean, if you don't stay technical in some way, you are going to no longer be technical, right? And then no longer be credible, no longer be effective, etc. But that might take years, right? But it will happen. So another kind of related challenge is that if you're trying to combat that, like, how can I stay technical, right? A challenge there is, if you are too hands-on, you are going to be seen as a micromanager, right? And so that balance is not easy, right? Because you want to ask questions, right? You want to ask your engineers, like, hey, how does that work? But that can come across as like, how does that work, right? Like you don't trust the engineers, right? But no, but if you're genuine about this, if you're curious, you're really interested, right? And so be able to find that balance, like, I'm interested, but I'm not judging necessarily. I'm not micromanaging. I'm curious because I want to stay technical. I want to understand. I want to maybe see things that you haven't seen, right? And maybe I can bring my expertise and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So to balance the hands-on / being technical without coming across as a micromanager is a challenge, right? It's easy to fall into you're just a micromanager, you want to know all the details, etc. So that's going to be, anyone who's doing this, and including myself, is going to make mistakes. Someone is going to be seeing you as a micromanager. So you have to kind of tone it down a little bit, but don't tone it too much down, because then you no longer be technical. So you have to find that right balance, and the balance is not easy. And to me, it's like, it is something that I try not to, but I still do sometimes. You may have heard this from managers who say, "Oh, I used to be an engineer," right? And when you start hearing that, it's basically the manager saying they are no longer an engineer. They are no longer technical, right? Because if you have to say, I used to be an engineer, that probably means like, okay, maybe you're no longer an engineer, right? Like,
you're done. You're done. You're done with it.
Right? You're done, yeah. Like, and to me, like, even for me, because I've done that, even for me, when I say that, I hear myself saying, it's like, oh no, like, I'm losing it, right? So that's a trigger for me to, okay, need to go back, like, read code, build my project, whatever, right? I need to feel like I'm credible without having to say, trust me, I used to be an engineer, right? So, and basically the challenge revolves around credibility versus micromanagement, right?
Okay, thank you. So if you're just joining in and you want to ask Julio questions relating to this topic, you can drop in your questions and I would put it up on screen and ask Julio the question for you. Okay, so Julio, do you believe that leadership skills can compensate for a lack of recent technical experience? Or is it essential for engineering leaders to stay hands-on with coding or technical projects? Most times a lot of leaders feel leadership skills if I can lead you, I'm also in the technical space.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, as an engineer, if my boss was not technical, I would not trust them. Right? And sure, if they're really a really good manager and help with my career, and I said, okay, that's good, right? But I don't think would ever compensate for the lack of technical skills, right? And so that was for me when I was an engineer, and even honestly, even as a manager, even an engineering leader, I still want my manager to be technical, right? Not necessarily to code, right? There are many ways of being technical, but I can have a conversation like with another peer, like we're talking about, at certain levels. You're no longer talking about refactoring or or this language or that language, but you could be talking about what it means to address tech debt, or how we go from this cloud provider to that cloud provider. And if my manager has no idea what I'm talking about, will be a very boring conversation, right? So again, I mean, it is a little bit similar. My answer here will be a bit similar to the previous one, is around the balance, right? It's like, yes, you can compensate a little bit, right, by not being technical if you have strong leadership skills, because you can then focus on building a strategy for the team, right? Like a vision for the team. You can coach a team in the if they're stressed out, and all the soft skills stuff. Like, you can help them, and that's helpful, right? That's good, right? That's good that you can do that. How to communicate, you can coach them in how to communicate, which is a good skill to have for anyone, including engineers. But if that's all you do, which is already pretty good, right? The strategy and coaching and help communicate and help them grow their career, all good skills to have. But if that's all you do, you are going to lose credibility eventually. Not immediately, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen. You will lose credibility. And when the teams need goals from you, you are going to give them unrealistic goals, right? Because you yourself don't understand technology that much anymore. So everything seems easy or very doable, right? But you don't have the skills anymore. So you're going to eventually hurt the business because you are giving the teams unrealistic goals, right? In the more immediate term, you are going to start losing credibility with the team. Now, maybe you as a leader, you say, okay, you know what? That's fine. That's the price I'll pay, right? But that will happen. Now, on the other hand, if you're too hands-on, right? It's like, okay, I don't want any of that, so I'm going to be hands-on, right? So now I have the credibility. I can make good decisions for the team. Yeah, but well, it takes more time, right? Obviously, right? It's a time thing. That's related to what I was saying earlier, that it's hard to be a good manager and a good engineer, right? Both at the same time. But I would suspect that you are also going to be seen as a micromanager, which eventually affects morale and which affect productivity. Right?
Okay, so I want to ask you one personal question, right? That was dropped on the group now. I want to ask you one, and I would also then ask the main question. So, if you were to flash back to 1994 when you started learning tech, right? What would you have done better? These are that's I think 30 years. Yes. So what would you have done better if you had to flash back to those days?
I would say, so the fact that being a programmer and then accidentally became a manager, all that stuff, I would not change. That's fine. I would probably do the same thing again. But there's one thing that I would 100% do differently. I would look for mentors. I never had a mentor in my life. I mean, an official one. Obviously, I talked to people and got guidance from people, right? But I never had someone who's like, hey, you are my mentor, and we meet once a month, and I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to give me advice. Never had that. Not because I didn't want to. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that was a possibility. Like, why would anyone do this? I never thought about it, right? And throughout my career, I see people who had mentors. At first, I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. I guess I never thought about it, but that's cool. But then I see the impact that mentors have on, I was going to say on engineers, but really on anyone. And then it hit me like, man, I'm swimming against whatever the expression is, against the flow, whatever, right? It's like, because I'm trying hard here. But if you have a mentor, it's like they're pushing you, right? Like they're helping you. And the more mentors, probably the better, right? One mentor, I guess, is good, but you could have several mentors, right? I would definitely recommend anyone starting or not, right, to have mentors. And the good thing
So
is, like,
mentorship is key.
100%, 100%. And I mean, now it's much easier to get mentors. Again, like in '94, without the web and whatnot, it was hard. And that was not in Silicon Valley back then. Where like, where am I going to ask for mentorship? Like, I don't know how to do this, right? So I'm on my own, right? But now it's so much easier, right? You can go on LinkedIn and just randomly tag people, like, and someone will say, "Sure, I'll be your mentor," right? So I definitely recommend that.
Okay, and the other question, okay, I have one question here, but let me ask. I said I was going to ask two questions. So the other question is, um, now is it that a thing for you personally that you want to? Are you looking at stopping coding entirely? And when I mean coding entirely, I mean everything that has to do with tech. And it will get to a point that you just want to retire from all of this. Is it a thing you're looking at, or you see yourself even at retirement, you still want to stay technical regardless?
100%. Now, if you ask me again in 2 years or 2 years after I retire, I guess maybe I'll have a different answer. I don't know. But right now, what I'm thinking is like, yeah, 100%. It's like that's just how I think, and that's how I think a lot of engineers think, right? So I was saying earlier, Eero, that I collect music and whatever, right? So, and I collect vinyl, which is not digital, right? It's like a piece of plastic, right? And I go to record stores and go through the records, and there's many records, many artists, and that I don't know, right? It's like, but records cost money, right? It's expensive. So like, I don't know if and by the way, now if you go to a record store, you can no longer listen to the record before you buy it, right? It's like, it used to be like that, but now it's like, well, you buy it, and then if you don't like it, I guess you can return it, but you cannot just listen to it right before you buy. So I was thinking, it's like, man, this sucks, right? It's like, I'm buying music and I don't know if I'm going to like it or not. So I was thinking, it's like, oh, I know, I can build an app that that takes a picture of the album, then talks to Spotify, and I can listen to it as I'm like, oh, right. So I was thinking of ways of automating this, and I think that will stay no matter what I do. Like, I'll think of ways of automating everything that I'm doing. Like, how can I automate this? And of course, that's going to be like through some technology, AI or not AI, doesn't matter, right? But it'll be some technology, right? And I think that will stay with me for sure.
Okay, so I have one question. I'm going to bring it up now. Can you see it?
That was Ayomide. What's the most surprising thing that you've seen technology do, and how it makes think differently about tech stuff? Cool. Man, like, many things, obviously, right? That's kind of an easy answer. Many things. I would say, well, it's going to be probably not going to be surprising to anyone here, but it's like one of the biggest, perhaps because more recent surprises, has to do like AI, ChatGPT, etc. Right? But that's kind of obvious, and I'm happy to talk about that. But I want to go back to all the way to 94, 95, actually. The first time I saw a web browser.
Oh, wow.
Which I think it was Mosaic. It was like, I don't know if that was the first browser. I think so. Mosaic, right? If you Google Mosaic browser.
Okay, Mosaic, yeah,
Yeah,
Mosaic.
I think like the first one. And I remember, like, someone was talking like, oh, have you heard about this new thing, the web, whatever? Like, I don't know what that is. So like, and I see this browser, like, holy moly. Like, and by the way, it wasn't, if you see it now, you would not be impressed, right? Because it was like, you had some text. So you load a page, boom, the text shows up on the screen. And then there was an image that started showing, like, tick, 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 slowly. Like, it was very slow. It was like, you would hate it today, right? But back then, it was like, this is magic, right? Like, and now I click on that and load another page from another country. It was, so the web and the first browser, 100%. Since then, many things, like just being able to, like Web 2.0, like now you can like social networks and things like that. That was obviously massive. But more recently, I would definitely say ChatGPT. To me, that was now a year later, right? Not that long ago. A year later, when we kind of almost blasé about, like, yeah, of course, AI, ChatGPT, we get it, right? But I mean, if you go back a year, your first ChatGPT prompts, it felt like magic, right? Like it's like this is amazing. It's like they know. It's like this is great, right? It's like I can like write code with it, right? It's like I did try. I don't like it anymore, but I did try in the beginning using Copilot, to help me with code, whatever. It feels magic, right? I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, I don't know, Yomide, if that was the answer you were
I
expecting, but
think it brought up another question. So I'll read this. What non-technical skills? Because we're mentioning tech, yeah, but there are still some non-technical skills. So what non-technical skills should tech professional focus on to maintain relevance as they shift away from coding totally?
okay. So two things that come to mind. One is everything has to do with soft skills, like really caring about other people, right? Like really having empathy for other people, like trying to understand where they come from. You'll never really understand, right? Because you have to be the other person to fully understand. But try to understand, like, where they come from, like, what's going on with them, like really relate to the other person as a human being, right? And that's not easy, especially, I mean, at least I didn't find that easy, right? As an engineer, what we love to do, or at least I imagine
Write
that's true
code.
for many. I just want to be with my machine, right? I don't want to talk to
Yeah, I
people.
don't
Like,
talk to anybody. Like really,
yeah, like I'm
I
happy
don't
with my
talk to
machine.
anybody.
Exactly, it does exactly. Often it does what I want it to do. That's perfect. This is great, right?
Just
And
just
now you're
loud,
talking.
loud, loud music and coding.
Exactly. It's like this paradise, right? And now you're asking me to like care about other humans' feelings and where they come from. Like this is hard, right? But it's also rewarding because I mean, to me, it's like every time I talk to someone and I feel like I know what the person is going through, and then I talk like, holy moly, like I had no idea, right? And I learn something, and I feel like I'm a better person each time. So definitely, like, care about uh, your team, the other folks, not just your team, but just humans in general. Um, Again, for us engineers, I feel like that could be a little bit harder, but really important. Now, in a more business oriented, I would say for me, one of the most difficult things, honestly, was everything has to do with finance and numbers, right? And like, uh, it didn't matter what I was building, cool tech, complex, making things super fast, and UX is amazing. That's all good. But at the end of the day, it's a business, right? Like we're doing this because we want to grow as a business and pay people salaries and whatnot. And to me, it was always very like, almost felt like, yeah, I'm not interested in that part. Like I just want tech for the sake of tech, right? That was me for a long time. And then learning like, no, like if you go this way, uh, yes, it will be a much cooler product, but it won't sell. In fact, we might have to shut down in a year, right? Because, well, it didn't sell, right?
Didn't sell.
So definitely focus on everything that has to do with running a business, how to make money. Now, I
I think
advise.
I think on my own part, right? I think it's more good when over time we've learned we're like you're a developer, you've been in developing space for quite a while and you've learned so much. It's still a good part when we now own a company to employ people too. That's we are also promoting revenue, right?
Correct.
We're generating revenue in income. So I think it's also like a good one too on that part to always have this business mindset. I think is what every because a lot of people always feel I don't want to go into the business side. I don't want
Yeah,
to go into the
absolutely.
business
And I
side of things.
understand. I understand.
But if you don't want to go in the business side of things as by you being it, but you can also be the financier of the business. You can take
Yep.
up the aspects to finance the business, but I think it's also like a good part. Everybody should also see towards the end of I want to be in the business management thingy side.
You know what I mean, it's not, I don't know if it's a quick hack, whatever, but it's an introduction to that I do with my teams, in particular engineers, like people who are in the front lines writing code. I'm sure many of you have heard or perhaps have said, like, oh, I need to work on this tech debt. I need to address this tech debt, right? And often, I mean, as an engineer, I get why. I know exactly why you want to work on that tech debt. But I asked the engineer, like, why? Why is that good for the business? That you know, let's say you want to refactor some code, right? Like, sure, but why? Like, how is that going to be good for the business? And one thing I noticed, like engineers, and I was there too, it's really hard for us to explain from a business point of view why I need to address this. Why do I need to refactor this code? Like, what's the business advantage to refactor that code? But there is 100%. There is an advantage to do it, right? And to me, like by asking that question, I'm forcing the engineer to start thinking more in terms of business, right? It's like, okay, well, because if I refactor this code, then I can, you know, next time I'm building a feature around this code, it will go 5 times faster. And 5 times faster, I'll be able to build more features. I'll be able to, you know, the product will be a more sellable, right? But there's a connection between addressing tech debt and business, and I want the engineers to find it and to express it and to feel it, right? And to me, that's like my easy introduction to, like, it's not just about the tech, it's also about the business, and I want you to find it and I want you to express it.
Okay, so I think you got a comment.
Oh, thank you, Emile.
And also another one. Yeah, so our next question. Looking ahead, what do you think would be the most critical skills for engineering leaders to possess in order to remain technical? Okay, I know of communication, right? That's like one.
Sure.
Communication skills, that's one skill. Yeah. So what do you think is like critical skills for engineering leaders to possess? Now that you've been actually mentoring engineering leaders and all of that, so what do you think it's like? It's a crucial thing. You need to just have this one. Very, very important.
So yeah, we did touch into several, like the emotional intelligence and being curious, whatever. Okay, those are important. But I find like one of the things that stays with me, and I think I never actually reflected on this very much, but now that you're asking the question, I am reflecting on, I think like a big transition, a big trigger in my career is when I came across a book called, I think it's Thinking in Systems, something like that. But it's about systems thinking, right? So recommend that book, Thinking in Systems. And I really think that changed the way I see things, because system thinking is really like, okay, we're going to do this, and here's, sorry, what was that?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. And so systems thinking is, I don't know if it changed the way I think about my teams, but I'm thinking about it all the time. When someone says like, oh, we're going to do this, it's like, okay, but that's going to imply this, going to do that. And then there's all sorts of implications, like, because you cannot change one thing over here and nothing else changes, right? So by doing something over here, that's going to have some impact somewhere. And sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. So thinking like stepping back and seeing, not just seeing actions here and there, but seeing them as part of a bigger system. To me, that was an eye opener. Like it really changed the way I think about teams, about tech, about, I mean, without sounding too grandiose, about life in general. Like everything has an implication, right? You cannot, even like really like you cannot pass a law, for example, about this without expecting some consequences. And do you understand the consequences, right? So systems thinking amazing for me, like really transformational for me. But then like more down to earth, maybe, I don't know. Just thinking more strategically, right? Uh, just understand what strategy means. How can you write your own strategy, maybe for your engineering team or for the company if you are a company owner. Uh, just like strategic and system thinking, I would say those two are not technical per se. In fact, they're not technical, uh, but they're crucial.
Okay. So, there's some engineering leaders. Do you think it's all okay? I think let's do it this way. Do you think it's everyone that needs to pass through after being a developer to the managerial level, engineering leader all over, or some persons don't fit in?
I mean, in practice, no. There's plenty of managers who were never engineers, right? So, okay, well, to me, those are not my preferred managers, but maybe they're really good and they help the team, and that's fine, right? So in practice, no, you don't need to be an engineer to eventually become a manager of engineers. That happens, but I would guarantee that you're not going to be the best engineering leader, right? So, but maybe that's also what you're asking, Hero. Like, in order to progress in your career, do you have to become
Yes,
a
yes.
manager?
Do you
Yeah,
have to? Yeah.
like, I really don't think so. Like, it's
Because
a
some
it's a
persons
whole.
have this feeling of okay, I started out as an intern, then I'm moving into a junior, then a senior, then I'm already leading my front end team, then I'm going to leading the tech
That's it,
lead
right? That's how you
team,
progress, right?
it just so they feel that's like it's just like in progression. But I think some persons, right? I've seen some senior developers that they be like, I don't want to be a tech lead. I just want to retain this my senior developer. Give me tasks and all of that. I don't want to just
Yeah,
be a tech
and
lead.
that's totally fine. So I do agree that that's a career, right? You can go all the way to the end to retirement and never managing people and always be evolving. I think that's possible, right? And it is true that in our industry we have this stigma, like after a few years, uh, depends on the company maybe or whatever, but after a few years you're supposed to become a manager, otherwise you're stagnating. I think that's wrong. I do think that's right. I became a manager by accident, right? Because my boss left and said that I would be good there. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened, but maybe I would have been an engineer all my life, right? A hands-on engineer. So most companies I've worked for have what they call a dual track, right? Where you are an engineer and then become senior engineer and then lead, whatever, right? Depends on the company. But it comes to a point where you say, okay, do you want to continue growing as an engineer, as an IC, individual contributor? Do you want to continue as an IC, or do you go into management? But it's not like if you stay engineer, you stagnating. You can continue growing, right? So your career basically is two tracks now. And some people absolutely stay engineer, and then they go to a staff engineer and distinguished engineer, and they go all the way to retirement without managing even a single person, right? And that's totally fine. When I was at IBM, to the acquisition that I mentioned before, I was working with folks that were fellow engineers, right? That's the highest engineer level at IBM, and those people had invented SQL. By the way, they were like at the end of their careers, right? They had invented SQL, right? So we learned a lot from those, but they were not managing people. They were just like continue to be programmers, right? But very, very advanced stuff they were doing. For me, it's like at some point I took
That
I took a
route.
different turn and then I went into management, right? Uh, and honestly, and this happens quite a bit where people jump from one track to the other. It's like, oh, I don't want to be a
True.
manager anymore. I want to go back to being a programmer.
Coding.
And you don't go all the way back to being a junior programmer, right? You are now like a more advanced, like you understand impact, you understand influence, you understand scalability, and that makes you a better engineer, even though you don't have people that you manage. So I don't think that you have to switch. Being a manager is a different job. It's like you switching careers, right? I mean, of course, they're very close careers, but you are switching careers. You're not going to be doing the same thing anymore. So you have to know, you have to almost love to help people, right? And that's what you care about, is like helping your team build a better product, a better business. But that's a different career. That's a different job.
Okay. So I think we are actually rounding up because it's 1 hour already. But I would want you to give advice to the different set of people that we have here. So the different set are people that are just starting out in tech, right? So what advice would you give to those that, based on your experience, right? What advice would you give to people that are just starting out in tech? And also people that have started but are just like, they're just in the journey. They're not up there yet. They're just in between in the journey. And the ones that are experts as per the senior level techies, regardless of being a developer, UI UX, this is covering all tech fields. So what advice would you give to these three different categories of people?
So the first one was engineers starting out, right?
Yeah. Okay. Not really engineers, but generally as a tech person.
Okay. Yeah, I would go back to finding a mentor.
Okay. Mentorship.
Finding finding a mentor, I think that's huge. That will be transformational. I mean, you learn things that college cannot teach you, that books cannot teach you. It's like, it will be transformational for sure. So I'd say that, find a mentor. And then what was the second one, Nero?
The ones that they've started, but they're just like, they're just in the journey. Like, let's say they're in between.
Got it. Yeah. I would say be curious, and I'm gonna, drill down on what that means. It's very common, and I see it all the time. So I imagine it's very common everywhere. It's very common for, let's say, a product manager or a manager or a stakeholder to say, okay, engineer, I need you to build A, B, and C this sprint or iteration or month or whatever we like. And the engineer goes like, okay, I'll do that. That's very common. I think that's a mistake. You have to ask why. What's the value of building this? Why do you want it? Right? So my advice is, like, as an engineer, ask those questions. Now, careful, because sometimes when you ask those questions, you can come across as difficult, like, oh, you don't want to do it, you're just asking questions, right? So there's a way of asking the question, but absolutely ask the question. Product manager, what is the business value for this? Like, what are you trying to accomplish, right? I'll do it. I'll do what you ask, but why do you need it? Because what happens is, when they explain why they need it, you as an engineer might think like, oh, that's a much better way and easier way to do that, right? And cheaper, right? But if you don't ask, because maybe you're afraid of coming up as difficult, right? If you don't ask, you are not helping the business, honestly, right? You're just going to do what the product manager thought, but they're not engineers. They don't have all the solutions, right? They only have the problems. That's what they're trying to do, right? So
let me chip in something here, because I think it recently happened. There was actually tax that was given, and then I felt, because I was inquisitive to know what's the entire goal about this tax, because we get to know, like, who are the end users of what we want to build, and what's like the main goal behind it. It gave me clarity on how best to make that tax more efficient, the application more efficient, because then I was no longer thinking to build it in a particular direction. I was thinking from the point of those that want to use it, how best will they enjoy what I am building. So it's actually important to know the goal of a particular app to give it 100%. The best feel. It's just like 100%. When you have TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn.
Mhm.
there are different ideas to
Sure. Yeah.
those
Sure.
apps. So just
Mhm.
imagine there is no goal on, okay, I want people to come and do professional stuff. They
Mhm.
can actually build LinkedIn just like Instagram, or
Yeah.
because there's like
That's
a
right.
goal towards what they really want, and questions are
Mhm.
being asked towards all of those tasks. It makes it more easy for
Yeah. Well,
developers to know what best to do.
it's funny because even for you, I mean, not you personally, Euro, but for you, the engineer,
Yeah.
to understand like why we're building, it's better, like for your personal satisfaction. I get this quite a bit where an engineer comes to me and says like, "Oh, so and so asked me to build this feature, but honestly, I don't even know why we're building it." So my question is like, "Have you asked why?" It's like, "Well, no." Like, there's your problem right there. Like, why didn't you ask? Right? It's like, ask, hey, why are we building this? Right? But I could tell they did not ask for whatever reason, and they were feeling bad about building it. Right? So now it's a lose-lose situation. Right? It's like they're
Yeah.
sad and they don't know. Like, anyway, so the easy solution is like ask. Right? Okay, maybe they'll say, "Oh, you're being difficult," but honestly, if you ask in a respectful way, you're not going to be difficult. You're just curious. It's like, oh,
Just curious.
this
Yeah.
person is
Just
great.
curious.
They actually ask questions. They are interested, right? So I
And there
think
could
it'll
be a
be more
time
positive.
asking questions would even give you better way to tell them, I think you can do this
Yes,
better.
correct,
Then they are
correct.
more surprised that, okay, they never thought of this angle,
Yeah,
because you've
exactly.
asked.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so for the experts, what's your advice?
So, uh, so, so those are like people are like different.
The, yeah, the ones that are already in the system, they are senior developers, they're doing so well, but they've really not gotten to the engineering
I would say,
managerial
yeah,
role.
okay. This will be maybe a surprise. I don't know, but I'd say, don't go into management because you want to grow your career, right? Like, don't do that. You're not gonna like it, right? I mean, maybe you will if you're lucky, right? But chances are you are not going to like it and you'll regret that, right? So going to management just to grow your career is not the right thing. It's a different career, right? It's like say, oh, now I want to be a baker, right? Like, well, that's going to be different, right? So don't do that unless you feel like this need to
To
help
do it.
people, to scale, to like, if that's your passion, great. I mean, like I said, I got into it by accident, but it worked out for me. But I got lucky, right? uh, but I'll say like instead, see how you can scale, because growing as an engineer or a manager is about scalability, right? It's about scaling. How can you be the same person, but now you're helping 100 people or 10 or 1,000, right? But you're helping more people do a better job. So as an engineer, you can absolutely build tools and automation and processes and whatever that will help the other engineers, and that's how you grow. Now you go from lead engineer to staff to distinguished by the impact you're having, right? It's like if you're doing things that impact a lot of people, a lot of business impact. That's how you grow, even though you're just an engineer, right? You're not a manager, right? So know where you're going, what you're getting into. Like if you love to be you and your machine, which I totally understand, there is like a bunch of things that you can do without being a manager, but always think about impact. Am I having a bigger impact than another engineer, a lower level, right? Now, if you
Okay.
love teams and build teams, absolutely go into management. It's a lot of fun and very satisfying for the people who love it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julio. Really, thank you so much. That's been an interesting conversation because we actually dived into how one can stay relevant when they no longer code. And we've learned a lot from you. Aspect of moving as to 1994. Like, I wasn't born then. So I really don't know how the life was then. But then it's an interesting one to hear from you and to understand your own journey, starting from then till now, and how you moved from a particular location from all of the startups, being a developer to being an engineering manager, and now you are not just an engineering leader, you're an engineering leader that is also leading engineering leaders. That's interesting, and it's very obvious that you actually paid this price. So it's obvious you paid the price, and thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us. And I'm sure you all have enjoyed one or two and you've learned one or two from Julio's conversation on this topic, staying relevant when you no longer code. Yes, I've seen some questions, but we cannot actually put everything up because of time. So what you can do for us is you can drop the questions in the chat. I would always do well to give response to those questions. And also you can reach out to Julio on LinkedIn. Julio Santos, that's his name. So you can reach out to him on LinkedIn. If you have personal questions you feel you can actually ask him. I'm sure Julio is open for your
100%.
questions. Yeah,
100%.
because I love his passion towards helping people grow too in their own career space. So you can reach out to him for questions and he's gonna answer for you. So I think that's all for now. Thank you everyone for staying up until this time. Do well to follow us on our Instagram page. Do well to follow us on Twitter at Tech with Hero, on Instagram at Tech with Hero, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel. Remember, we always bring great experts to you because we value you so much and we try as much as possible to bring in people that we know their story and impact can be felt on your own career. So thank you so much, and reach out to all of your friends that are in the tech space and tell them about this episode, especially those that you know need it, so that they don't just stay outdated in tech, but they stay relevant in tech because they no longer code. They can still be relevant in doing every other thing that has to do with tech. So thank you, Julio. I'm
Thank you so
grateful once
much. It
again.
was a lovely time. I love the questions. I'm honored that you asked me to participate here. And absolutely, for your audience, do not hesitate. Ask me questions on LinkedIn. I will 100% interact with you for sure.
Okay, so to this end, thank you and see you all next episode. We're not having episode next week because next week is for our community check-in. So I want to give time to my community people. So we'll be having our podcast on the 4th of May, our next episode. So stay tuned till 4th of May. If you're wondering who are the community members, you can actually check us up on our website or any of the social media pages, so you can get the link to the community space and you can join in. And it's going to be an interesting one next week Saturday because we're having a community check-in to get to know our community members. So bye everyone.